So there are too many different ways to clarify people in their lives. Some of them are engineers just trying to get a task done, trying to get the computer to do the dance. That's all they were interested in. And other people are doing it for psychological purposes. But they aren't two completely separate types. Because after all, if you are what have called an engineer, an AI engineer, and you're trying to get something to translate or interpret protocols, whatever it is, how are you going to do it? When your first ideas usually are going to come from your intuitions, which may or may not be right, of course, but your intuitions about how you think people do it, or accurately probably how you think you do it. So in fact, a lot of the people who do AI for these purely technological purposes are actually riding on the back of psychological theories. But the point is, they don't care if they sort of fall off the back of that horse, as long as they keep tracking.
Many different types of barcode scanning machines exist, but they all work on the same fundamental principles. They all use the intensity of light reflected from a series of black and white stripes to tell a computer what code it is seeing. White stripes reflect light very well, while black stripes reflect hardly any light at all. The barcode scanner shines light sequentially across a barcode, simultaneously detecting and recording the pattern of reflected and non-reflected light. The scanner then translates this pattern into an electrical signal that the computer can understand. All scanners must include computer software to interpret the barcode once it's been entered. This simple principle has transformed the way we are able to manipulate data and the way in which many businesses handle record-keeping.
Okay, so let's have a quick summary because we've galloped through a bit of philosophy here. I've suggested that we're rationally required to do what morality requires of us, so it's reasonable that tells us what we should and shouldn't do. If we don't do what rationally requires of us, this is because we're ignorant, or, if you don't agree with Aristotle or Socrates, we're possibly weak or corrupt, and we may be ignorant of what morality requires of us because we're relying on others. So what's all this got to do with climate change?
During the past week, NPR has been reporting on the growing income gap in America. Economists say one big reason for the widening divide is the steady loss of manufacturing jobs. As more and more U.S. companies move factory jobs overseas, people who lack skills and education have trouble making a decent living. When the living When the Carrier Air Conditioning Company shut down its Syracuse, New York plant in 2004, 1,200 jobs were lost. The current financial state of the laid-off workers depends on their skills, age, and degree of determination.
And on Wednesday we focus on the workplace. Today we take you inside a clothing factory. It's not in China, or Mexico, or Hungary, where many men's suits are made these days. If the suit is a Joseph Abboud, the label says Made in America. This company is one of the few that still produces suits in the United States, and it's not trying to send jobs overseas.
William had just graduated, only by a few months, from what was called the Mathematical Tripos at Cambridge, which is an honours BA in mathematics with a lot of physics. But he had never given a lecture as far as I can tell. He had never taught, he'd never done a research project, and he certainly had never published a research paper. He was just a young student, just graduated.
To figure out these counterintuitive findings, the researchers conducted an experiment in a hotel room. They rounded up some lizards, gave them a perch, and then used a leaf blower to mimic the effects of high winds. They set up a net to catch any lizards that lost their grip. As the artificial wind blew, the lizards moved so the perch took most of the airflow. But their hind legs would stick out, and if those rear limbs stuck out too far, they acted as sails.
Eventually, those back legs were blown off the perch, and the lizards were just holding on with their front two legs. And they could only hold on like that for so long as the wind speeds increased further and further until eventually they were blown off the perch and into the nets.
So shorter back legs gave a survival advantage, a trait that might be passed on to the next lizard generation.
Yes. I mean, if we look at 5 in the world's past history, when did we see a 5-degree temperature change? You have to go right back into the last ice age, so the sort of temperature difference we're talking about in the future, of course, going up, is to the temperature difference between a warm period and a typical ice age. So what this means is that the world's climate system will change. If you just take one country, India is totally dependent on the monsoon. If the monsoon fails one year, that means, the word implies less than 10% of average rainfall, then they have crop failure. If the monsoon 10% exceeds the average, they have massive flooding, so they're dependent on that monsoon. Now nobody believes that a temperature rise of 3, 4, 5 degrees isn't going to have an impact on that monsoon. Candace Galen is based at the University of Missouri, in Columbia. And, being a biologist, she thought, why not use this astronomical phenomenon to study a biological one? Specifically, as the skies darkened would daytime pollinators, like bumblebees and honeybees, call it quits. What better activity during an eclipse than to go out with a recorder and record the bees? So Galen asked 400 citizen scientists, including young students, to place audio recorders in 16 flower patches along the path of totality, in Oregon, Idaho and Missouri. When they analyzed the audio, they found that during partial eclipse, bee buzzing continued. But when totality hit, the bees went silent and only the conversational buzz of human observers could be heard. Then, as the moon passed and the sun again lit up the sky, the bees regained their buzz.
I'm a big fan of gap years. I took one myself, so I'm probably biased. I think that if you've got something you want to do in the year before you come to university, that you should do it, and a lot of students who want to study a biology degree actually want to go off and travel and perhaps work on a conservation project, and of course that's all very good. It will contribute towards your degree and your preparation for that, and then when you come to us you'll be ready for your studies. So if there's something you really want to do, then my advice is to go for it.
One of the things that people have said about agriculture is that on the whole, it is more labor-intensive than hunting and gathering, and that's one of the reasons why people have looked to explanations which, you might say, are kind of coercive factors, that people have been forced into agriculture because they had no alternative. That is ultimately what may happen. But at the very beginning, it could be that agriculture was developed because people wanted special status foods for feasting, that it was actually a social need. I mean, how much of what we do in our lives is generated by competition with others? And a lot of that is powered by the desire for new things, new statuses, new whatever it might be. Respect and recognition also are important. And in small-scale societies, a lot of those sorts of factors are generated by the ability to, for instance, throw feasts. One possibility is that some of these foods that were being grown were actually intended especially as feasting foods.
Another installment of our weekly Brief but Spectacular. The Hospitality House has been offering support to homeless and poor residents of San Francisco's Tenderloin neighborhood since 1967. Its executive director, Joe Wilson, has been affiliated with the organization for more than 35 years and is uniquely qualified for the job.
I have literally slept in gutters at night. I've gone to sleep at night on the street, in some cases hoping that morning would not come. The coldness, the starkness, the inhumanity of being on the street with nothing, without the security that four walls can bring, is a very debilitating experience.
Many different types of barcode scanning machines exist, but they all work on the same fundamental principles. They all use the intensity of light reflected from a series of black and white stripes to tell the computer what code it is to see. White stripes reflect light very well, while black stripes reflect hardly any lights at all. The barcode scanners shine light sequentially across the barcode, simultaneously detecting and recording a pattern of reflected and non-reflected light. The scanner then translates this pattern into an electrical signal that the computer can understand. All scanners must include computer software to interpret the barcode once it has been entered. This simple principle has transformed the way we are able to manipulate data and the way in which many businesses handled record keeping.
The majority of U.S. high school students say they get bored in class every day, and more than 1 out of 5 has considered dropping out, according to a survey released Wednesday. The survey of 81,000 students in 26 states found two-thirds of high school students complain of boredom, usually because the subject matter was irrelevant or their teachers didn't seem to care about them.
It is about 100 years since that great Canadian-born physician Sir William Osler, Regius Professor of Medicine in Oxford, complained about the increasing influence of the pharmaceutical industry on the medical professions. If he knew how this influence had increased since then, he would be turning in his grave at the way the industry now dominates doctors' prescribing habits. It does habits. It does this not only by direct and indirect pressure on the doctors themselves but also by encouraging the public to ask for scripts and to demand that governments provide the money.